Pro Football Today on SportsGrid, Kevin Walsh and Joe Lisi. As we get closer and closer to the NFL draft, the Raiders will be on the clock. For quite some time, we've expected them to draft Fernando Mendoza. We've spent quite a bit of time, though, talking about these teams at the top. All right, hold on. Timeout. He made a face. Joe Lisi made a face. Now, here's the thing. I just have to check. Did you make a face because you think Mendoza may not go first, or are you just excited to be here?
No, I'm excited to be here. But, I mean, obviously, with the addition now of Kirk Cousins to the roster, Kevin, anything's possible. I think it's a pretty good, solid move for Las Vegas to bring in a veteran quarterback, a locker room guy like Kirk Cousins, to potentially mentor Fernando Mendoza. I think it's Fernando Mendoza and everybody else as it relates to the draft at the quarterback position. We've talked about this all off season, that it's not a deep draft for quarterbacks as it relates to franchise guys. And Mendoza answered the bell. He's a national champion. He elevated Indiana and stepped up in the biggest games. I think there's no doubt that he's number one overall. I just think that the debate then becomes, how many quarterbacks will go in round number one?
So the Cousins signing in Vegas isn't something that you and I had talked a lot about. And I am torn on it ultimately because Mendoza is someone that I am excited to watch play at the next level. You know that. But I'm also someone who has been very open to the idea of allowing a quarterback to sit. It has yielded good results in, the few circumstances where that opportunity has been afforded. Jordan Love in Green Bay, Pat Mahomes in Kansas City certainly come to mind. So, do you think that Mendoza Cousins is a competition? Do you think that Vegas should start Kirk week one and then eventually go to Mendoza? How do you see that likely quarterback situation setting up?
Well, I think because you have a first-year head coach and you have a rookie quarterback, they're going to make them, I believe, compete for the job, and that's why you bring in a veteran like Kirk Cousins. But I'm in the camp of you start him right away. As long as he's healthy, you want to get as much game experience for Fernando Mendoza possible, ready for year number two. Right now, I don't have a problem if they start him, let's say, after the month of September. If you want to give Kirk Cousins maybe 4 or 5 starts, I get that. It's similar to what Russell Wilson did for the New York Giants. And then obviously they moved on to Jackson Dart. But as long as he's healthy, what is the downside? If he gets beat up, I get that. I understand that. And obviously offensive line is a concern. But you want to set him up for year number two. And the difference between, let's say, Jackson Dart and maybe Cam Ward is at least Jackson Dart had weapons out there. Malik Neighbors was a clear-cut number one wide receiver. When you look at Las Vegas, outside of Brock Bowers, they have major needs at the wide receiver position. Hopefully they draft in the later rounds to potentially address that. But look at Cam Ward. I mean, you need to be ready for year number two, and you need that talent to gel with the starting quarterback. So, again, I have no problem with Kirk Cousins starting the month of September and then moving on and then giving the reins to Fernando Mendoza. But with a first-year head coach and the big three potentially, Genty, Bowers, and Fernando Mendoza, you want all three of those players to develop at the same time as a cohesive unit. So, again, I would start him from game number one, but we'll see how it plays out.
I think it's difficult because we just never are able to reach consensus on what is best for the development of a young quarterback. So I think people then just say, well, just play him. I want to see him play, right? Or if he doesn't start, I must be terrible. Couldn't beat out Kirk Cousins. But you mentioned a year one head coach. There might be some learning on the job. Well, I may want him to learn how to look. I think that you can speak to it. You're a father. There's probably some things that you were able to learn from the first kid that made things a little bit easier for the second kid, right? I'm just saying, for Kubiak? Are there some things he can learn, Joe, to set himself up better for when it's time to really be coaching Fernando Mendoza? I think that's on the board, right?
No, it's possible. Yeah. I mean, Kevin, you're absolutely right about the learning curve, right? And we're talking about an organization in Las Vegas that the expectation and the bar is extremely low, right? I mean, we saw that play out with Pete Carroll. That's why he's no longer there. They don't have any foundation potentially right now. They're starting from the ground up. Now, does Max Crosby stay or does he go? We'll see how that potentially plays out in the next couple of weeks. But my point is, yeah, you can obviously allow Fernando Mendoza to sit behind Cousins and learn and potentially be ready. There's no duplicate, right? When you look at game experience, you could practice against it. You could be in a preseason type of game, but in an NFL regular season game, that valuable game experience is unprecedented. So again, you look at Tyler Shuck. He got better as the season progressed. Jackson Dart had his highs and had his lows. Cam Ward potentially started the whole year and is still now looked at as the guy, but he needs weapons. So when you look at Fernando Mendoza, he is the best quarterback in this draft class. He possesses leadership skills. Is he the best pure passer that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years? No. I think Caleb and obviously Jaden Daniels had a much higher ceiling from a physical attribute. But from a leadership perspective, he can learn on the job. And I think that's the biggest thing that he proved last year. He went to a new scheme, he went to a new team and elevated them to a national championship.
I think the big thing is you would expect continuity and agreement on the timeline from Kubiak to Spytek to Tom Brady, in that I'll start Cousins, right, and be patient if we all agree my job isn't on the line in year 2, right? There are some year 2. Aaron Glenn comes to mind immediately. Now, Aaron Glenn, different circumstances, but Aaron Glenn is coaching for his job. I think that's a unanimous opinion going into his second year. If I'm Kubiak, can I waste potentially a year with Cousins if I'm coaching for my job in year 2? If you get an agreement on the timeline, though, that can go a long way because, and you mentioned it, and we used to talk about it a lot, and people wonder why I always brought it up, Tyler Shuck. Tyler Shuck is 4 years older. 4 years older than Fernando Mendoza. Yep. So that means Fernando could sit for 2 years on the bench in Vegas. That's not going to happen, but he could, Joe. And he would still be twice, not twice as young, but he'd still be 2 years behind where Tyler Shuck is heading into this season. So I think that Vegas has given themselves options, but I also think, like, Tom Brady didn't start right away. There could be some interest internally to start Cousins regardless of what camp looks like. I think that's possible as well.
It is. So let me just say this about Kubiak. He's got at least 3 years, Kevin. He's got at least 3, maybe even 4, because he was the guru, right? He was the mad scientist of one of the hottest offenses in the NFL. He elevated JSN and Sam Darnold to elite status, right? He provided a game plan to make JSN the highest paid wide receiver. So think about that. He's not going anywhere. It's only going to come down to, what if Kirk Cousins wins games in year 1? What if he wins 7 games? And then now you're going to regress back to potentially 4 with a rookie quarterback? That is the downside.
We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to talk a little bit today about some of these back-end teams, though. The Panthers, the Eagles, the Bills, the Niners, all here on Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. And Joe, I'd like to just try and mix in some of the playoff teams, right? Because we don't have odds for a lot of these teams yet. There's certain markets we can find if to make some wagers. The first pick of a team who was in the playoffs last year belongs to Carolina. Interestingly, I think their slot is the floor for Kenyon Sadiq. It appears that any time Sadiq falls in a draft far enough to meet Carolina, he is often selected. I think the issue a little bit with that is I'm not entirely sure Kenyon Sadiq has any chance to make it all the way down to 19. What do you think about that potential fit? And what are your thoughts on Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end out of Oregon?
I like him. I mean, you look at his body; he's got a great frame. I mean, boxes out. I don't put Kenyon Sadiq. I'm going to say this right now, and maybe it's just because he played with Dante Moore, but I don't put him on the same level as Brock Bowers coming out of Georgia. I just don't. I don't put him, coming out where Fannin was as productive at Bowling Green, catching a ton of footballs. That I think Kenyon Sadiq is on the same level. Can he develop into that type of player? Absolutely, but I just think he's a little rigid in his body movement. I think he's a weight room guy, and again, has stepped up, but has been shut out in some games this year where against better competition. So, yes, I think he's a good tight end. I think tight ends are a premium if they're a first-round grade. Can he fall to 19? It's possible, but he's getting all the hype now, Kevin. I do not put him on the same level, though. I'm going to say this, expecting him to hit the ground running like a Brock Bowers 1,000-yard wide receiver in year number one. I just don't see it. And I do struggle with Bryce Young in Carolina if he did go there. Look, I don't even know where Bryce Young is in his development. You see the highs, you see the lows. He doesn't utilize the tight end consistently when you look at his play and his games throughout the regular season. Would Kenyon Sadiq elevate Ted McMillan and Coker and that wide receiver class? Yes, on paper, but I don't think it's a great fit with Bryce Young because I still think he has a world of development left in 2026.
We have seen for tight ends, it can be hard to be year one contributors. I mean, it's what makes Brock Bowers so special. I think,
right.
I know for me, for a lot of people, despite last year, I think he's still clearly the best tight end in the league. That's with respect to Trey McBride, who's one of the very, very best tight ends, one of the top three. I think it's probably Bowers, McBride, and Kittle as the three best tight ends in football. Obviously, Kittle's injured for the coming season. I don't think Sadiq would be a pick if you're being realistic in that room for Bryce, as much as it might be the next quarterback, where whomever the next quarterback comes into year three, Teteroa McMillan, year two, Kenyon Sadiq, Jalen Coker, you go, okay, now we've got something to work with here, possibly in Carolina. Interesting for Sadiq is he has an over-under draft position on one book, 15.5, minus 180 to the over, meaning he would be available pick 16, 17, 18. I saw a New York Jets beat reporter, Rich Cimini, say he actually is kind of getting to a point where he'd be surprised if Kenyon Sadiq were available come 16, where the Jets have that second selection come draft night. And there's a lot of talk about what the Jets might be doing here. I think what's interesting, Joe, is a lot of people, the Jets included, Carolina included, there's a lot of wide receiver chatter, I feel, as this draft goes on. And it becomes difficult because I think Carnell Tate feels like a top 10 lock. I feel like everything else is pretty uncertain right now within Tyson, Lemon, Concepcion. Let me ask you this question, Joe. Do you have a favorite second guy? Like, I think, let's just say Tate's going first. A lot of the expectations is that's what's going to happen with Carnell Tate. Who's your number two?
I like Concepcion because of his versatility. I mean, you saw that at NC State. It translated with Marcel Reed at Texas A&M. And again, his yards after catch for me are what makes him enticing. But again, it's possible Lemon could be that guy. Lemon reminds me exactly the way St. Brown was when he played for USC. Mm-hmm. He's a smooth route runner. Is he the 4.2, 4.3 blazing speed? No, but he creates separation and he never loses his speed when he comes out of cuts. I like that about Lemon. The problem with Lemon is, and I'll sort of chalk it up to inconsistent quarterback play at times in bigger games. Yeah, he stepped up, but he was also shut down and non-existent in crucial, games on the line, right? In the fourth quarter, I didn't see him take games over. So that would be a downside for me. But for me, if you're asking who's your number two, I like Tyson, but we talked about, obviously, the injury concerns. Concepcion, when you have a versatile player that can play inside, can play outside, yards after the catch, he can be utilized in fly sweeps and reverses. I like that type of player in my offense.
So for me, I still think the Tyson Health stuff has been a little bit, tough to, again, we don't have this information, so it's tough to get a read on. Peter Schrager recently mocked Tyson 9th overall to Kansas City, which was like a whoa kind of, is this guy going to be a top 10 pick? Does Kansas City love him? I thought that was a very interesting fit. And it maybe tells me that, Tyson could come off the board early, but it also could be a scenario where kind of how I think Joe is split, because it probably depends on the team, right? Some teams might like Concepcion. Rams, maybe they love Mekhi Lemon. Maybe a team like Pittsburgh loves Denzel Boston. Maybe a team like the Eagles loves Omar Cooper Jr. And that order becomes really, really difficult to nail down as we are a bit further out. We're running up against a break. When we come back, I do want to talk about the Eagles, that recent trade for Domtavian Wicks, and what that can set Philadelphia up for potentially on draft night, what it means about how this team is going to attack round one, and maybe more importantly, how they are going to attack Peter Rom this offseason.
Not all these kids, but the majority of these kids in the top 10 have had things handed to them since they're in third grade because they're special athletically. And the fact that they get humbled a little bit, I'm here for the humbling. I've been humbled. I like when other people get humbled.
Yeah, but you were humbled later. Yeah. You weren't humbled at 22 in front of the world.
No.
You were a grown-ass man.
The Craig Carton Show. Only on SportsGrid.
I got to tell you, Kansas basketball the last 3 months, if I was the number one player in the country, I'd cross them off my list. Bill Self did not do Darren Peterson any favors. And now Badunga's going to stay in college but leave Lawrence? I'm red flags, in my opinion, Gabe, around the Jayhawks.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Miami today laying 17.5. Miami wins, get a load of this, 152. When you hear 152, I don't care if you're laying 100. You're thinking you're winning that bet, right? They win 152 to 136. They only win by 16. Washington get the backdoor cover.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
Invest, find somebody else in the market right now, like JJ Weatherholt or someone else, because this is the worst time, I think, to buy a guy like Griffin.
You can bring up Polymarket right now. Go to the NL Rookie of the Year page. It is a roller coaster of everybody changing from favorite to not favorite to favorite to not favorite. Look at that. It's like a earthquake happening, Craig, and the Richter scale is going nuts.
Pro Baseball today, only on SportsGrid.
Pro Football Today on SportsGrid. We're looking at some of the teams drafting in the 20s. Chicago and Buffalo go back-to-back, Joe, 25-26. Both of these teams favor to draft defensive line with that first selection here. The Bears are up first on the clock. Now, listen, I think it's very tough because it's like, how does the board fall, right? But I think for Chicago, I wonder if some of the expectations are because people know they were very interested in Max Crosby. Obviously, they weren't able to make that move happen. You know, it's funny, like the Crosby streets are really quiet now. I wonder if at any point those pick up before we get to the draft here. But does the idea of Chicago or Buffalo taking defensive line in round number 1 really resonate with you?
I think for Chicago more so than Buffalo, and I understand Buffalo, has multiple needs still. Their defense was aging. They got rid of veteran players, and then, they made amends last year and were a solid unit, at least for the most part, when it mattered. But still, they need to address the defensive side of the ball. But I still think they need to address the offensive side of the ball on multiple positions. For me, Chicago, if they're going to take the next step with Ben Johnson, we know that they have the offensive pieces. Now let's elevate that defense to the next level to compete with the likes of, obviously, Detroit in the division, and then Philadelphia and Green Bay and all the teams that they have to go toe-to-toe with. So, yes, I think defense more so for Chicago than Buffalo right now.
I also noticed New England at that shorter number for defensive line. I wonder if that's a product of, again, drafting 31st, what people expect to be available for New England, Joe, because I got to tell you, I look at this depth chart and I'm not entirely sure trading for Romeo Doubs is enough to make, or signing Romeo Doubs is enough to make me think, okay, we're all good here, not in a C. I mean, wow. I know we like Kayshon Boutte. I know Matt Collins is, a contributor, but don't you think New England should be taking a look at the wide receiver position later in round number 1?
Absolutely. Look at the Super Bowl. I mean, Drake May was abused early and often because they did not have speed on the perimeter. Seattle pinned their ears back and just battered Drake May. They shut down the rushing attack with Henderson and obviously Ramondre Stevenson. And at the end of the day, they were forced into long third down situations. We talk about having a good group or a complementary group of wide receivers, and then having elite wide receivers that could really challenge defenses over the top. And if New England's going to take the next step or get back to a Super Bowl, they need speed on the perimeter. They lose Diggs. They lose, obviously, weapons on the outside. And you said Boutte was out of the league a couple of years ago coming out of LSU. He's not the same player that he was when he played with Max Johnson in Death Valley. I mean, again, yes, he's produced, but they don't have a pure number 1. It's like Buffalo. It's the problem. Look, Josh Allen can get to a certain level because he's Josh Allen. You want Josh Allen to get to a Super Bowl? Give him 2 number 1s on the outside and let him cook.
I have seen Pittsburgh priced as a team that they think could draft wide receiver with their first selection, kind of co-favorites with offensive line. Again, we've got time. I'm going to go through the mocks, watch the intel come in. But on its face, wide receiver doesn't track with me with Pittsburgh when I just think about who's in charge. Mike McCarthy comes from a Green Bay team who never drafted wide receiver in round number 1. And we assume Aaron Rodgers will be this team's quarterback. And if you said, hey, Rodgers, do you want wide receiver or offensive line? He'd pick offensive line, I think. So I'm a little surprised, Joe, at the way they're pricing Pittsburgh right now in the position of their first drafted player.
Yeah, absolutely. But I would go number 3. I would go defense. I would go edge rusher and defensive lineman. And I understand they addressed the defensive side of the ball last year. But again, look at teams that were elite, ran and threw the football on Pittsburgh. And this is a defense that entered last year with 8 30-year-old players on the defensive side of the football. They have to get younger And I still think they're in a rebuild, Kevin. I don't think this is, we're just one or two players away from competing for an AFC championship. I'll tell you what, they don't get the right one or two players, they're potentially looking at a 4-win season as opposed to a 10-win season.
This is a Pittsburgh team who I also got to tell you, I wouldn't hate a world where I think it was 7-1, that quarterback ticket cashes. Now that would make for a fun night. That would make for a fun night of action if they were willing to do that. I know some people want to see the Eagles do that. Don't get me started. We'll talk a little A.J. Brown after the break. You're on SportsGrid. Pro Football Today, impromptu A.J. Brown trade options presented by Joe Lisi. Just, I got his wheels turning now since I told him I think A.J.'s gone. Joe, did you have a landing spot in mind?
You can't give him to an NFC contender. It's got to be an AFC team. So, but you have to get something back, Kevin. You can, I understand he's been a locker room problem, and I get that. You want a guy that wants to win championships, keep his mouth shut, but you still want a guy that warrants a double team. And what we discussed in the break of having Wicks drafting a player, let's say like Lemon or Concepcion, in the later, 23rd selection, you have a similar wide receiver core to what Green Bay had with Jordan Love. You're not going to have a clear-cut number one. You could have, smaller wide receivers that can match up in red zone type of situations. You're going to have to rely on the tight end solely for those type of, opportunities. And again, I just think that's a significant disadvantage to what they have from an offensive philosophy now. Now, I understand last year was completely different than when Kellen Moore was the OC, and hopefully it reverts back similar this year. But at the end of the day, you still need a player that's a pure number one to elevate this team. If they're going to rely on a rookie coming in, that's a huge problem for Philadelphia. I'm sorry, it just is. Look at the teams in the division.
Why is Devonta Smith? You don't trust Devonta Smith to be the number one wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles?
I think Devonta Smith is a great wide receiver. But again, I don't think he could be a pure number one. I think, again, he's a complementary piece because of his size. I'm just saying.
Let me just say, I think it is totally fine, fair to hold that opinion, okay? But Devonta Smith was selected in the top 10. Devonta Smith has been paid like a, top 16 wide receiver in football. He's had 3 1,000-yard seasons under his belt. And if it wasn't for health, probably would be at 4. I mean, he nearly would have it in every single year so far of his young career, really, all things considered. And Joe, I mean, the opportunities for Devonta Smith, you could argue, are a bit limited due to circumstance. I think that, again, I have no problem with you questioning if Devonta Smith can do it, but I would argue very strongly that I think Philly asking him to and Philly expecting him to is totally logical based on the way their roster is set up.
No, understood. I agree with that, assessment, Kevin. But let me flip it on you. And before you jump down my throat, I want you to listen, because obviously Tyreek was a different player, right? Tyreek wasn't 6'2", 225 pounds like AJ, but he was that pure number one for speed. But when Hill was out of that lineup, did Jalen Waddle take the team on his shoulders? Was he that guy? He had 900 yards. He was at times inconsistent. And I understand injuries, but it's a similar type of situation. Waddle and Devontae Smith, in my opinion, are similar types of players. They're complementary. They're really good wide receivers, but are they pure number ones?
I think, you know what, though, Joe, and again, it's totally fine. You are different and maybe correct in that, Joe, there are 32 teams. You think there are like 6 pure number ones, right? Let's be real. Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, how many? JSN, Puka, any others? Like pure number ones, Joe. Like, there's not that for you. There's not that many. Right? Maybe you view A.J. Brown as one, the size that he brings to the table. Neighbors, if he gets healthy, we'll see how it looks, right? But you're not, at the end of the day, there's 32 teams, right? And yes, Devonta Smith, now not every team has a number one wide receiver, but I think there's 16 number ones, right? A Garrett Wilson comes to mind. Can Devonta Smith be Terry? Well, I was just going to bring up Terry McLaurin.
Right.
I think Devonta Smith's better than Terry McLaurin. I do. We can disagree on that. But Washington's number one wide receiver again is supposed to be Terry McLaurin.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a main reason why Washington had struggled last year, even when Jaden went down, is because they didn't have...
Terry went down as well.
Yes, but when Terry was in there too, he didn't have a complimentary number two to take the pressure off of him.
Yeah.
Again, that's what we're looking at, right? We like Wicks. I think Wicks is great as a number 3 with AJ and Devontae, as long as AJ's happy, right? That he can elevate that team. But now, if you're expecting Wicks to be the number 2, where Devontae now elevates to the number 1, I'm not wowed by that type of offense anymore. It's just not. It just doesn't. It's not like Chase and Higgins. You need think about it.
But Joe, let me just say this. No, but I'm glad you said that, Joe. I'm promise I'm not attacking you. The Cincinnati Bengals having Chase and Higgins and then Joe Burrow, that makes sense. They throw, 50 times a game.
Right.
The Eagles having AJ Brown and Devonta Smith doesn't make that much sense when they want to prefer Hurts to throw less than 30 times and run it with Saquon. It's not a good use of resources, really. It's not. Especially when the number one wide receiver then is constantly telling everybody he thinks the quarterback's not that good or whatever he's doing. It doesn't help.
Well, yes. We're talking strictly physical attributes, right? We're not talking about the off the field, the reading the book, or will they win 8 in a row and he didn't get his, so he's going to call a press conference. I'm not talking about those negatives. I'm talking about the pure physical, what he brings on the football field that makes defenses account for him on every single play because of his body size and speed. Right? When you take that out of the offense, it's like, let me ask you, is Wicks scaring anybody? Okay, so Devontae is now the number one. Are defensive coordinators up at night because they got to defend Wicks and Devontae Smith in the passing game?
No, they're not, Joe. They're not. And I think, but Joe, this is why I actually think Philly somewhat agrees with you. That's why they're looking to potentially draft a first-round wide receiver to replace A.J. Brown. I don't think Philly would be ecstatic with Smith, Wicks, Hollywood Brown as their wide receiver room.
Right.
But I think that's why they're looking to draft wide receiver within the first 2 rounds, potentially. I also think sometimes, and we'll see what he has in the tank, but he was, certainly from a touchdown out of it last year was phenomenal. I think they're looking for another really good year out of Dallas Goedert in Philadelphia.
Oh, Goddard's good.
But it's also about Saquon bouncing back. It's about Hurts kind of, finding that level of consistency. And it's about a new offensive coordinator. It's funny, you make the comparisons to Green Bay, but they bring the guy over from Green Bay. This might be where he's comfortable, right? Instead of having the elite super number one, it's a bunch of guys who can get open.
Yeah, and that is come playoff time a very difficult recipe when you can't count on your guy to step up and you don't know that you don't have that number one. That's why Jordan Love and Green Bay haven't been to the promised land, right? It looks like on paper, well, they have multiple concerns as well. But my point is, when we break down Green Bay, it's like, okay, where's the consistency in the passing game when you need it?
I think, listen, I hear you. I think some of that is LaFleur. You and I have agreed on how LaFleur calls games for a while. So I think that's kind of an element of that football team. I think the other thing is I feel like A.J. Brown has lost his reliability at times due to his demeanor, giving up on footballs, and things of that nature. We're going to stick towards the back-end teams here next on SportsGrid.
The fact that we are seeing now multiple states propose, not just prop bet bans, but getting rid of online sports betting altogether really shows kind of the pushback that the industry is facing right now and kind of the crisis it has to make sure in the public spotlight that it's being viewed accurately and that it's working with lawmakers on, common sense proposals.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Quickly learning that even though the Jays, Brady went to the World Series last year, they're not like one of those automatic teams. Like I consider the Yankees automatic, Dodgers automatic. That really might be it. Maybe not even the Mets. Just like think teams you can kind of count on. They're not going to lose to Colorado. They're not going to lose to the White Sox. Those type of teams.
In-game live, only on SportsGrid.
Scottie Scheffler, the best golfer in the world. How many majors will he win this year? And if he does get 4, Joe, that's currently trading at 3 cents. So a $100 investment actually only pays back $333 at this point, which is kind of insane when you ask him to win all 4. Joe, I told you already, sticking to my guns. $100 investment on no majors. None over the next 4 this year.
Prediction Markets Edge, only on SportsGrid.
You build teams in the second, third, and fourth round, right, Donnie? Yeah. That's where you build. That's where you get the depth. That's where you build the team. So teams looking for draft capital very much could be alive and well in this draft coming up because there's just nobody to mortgage the future for because you need your franchise guy. They're just not in this draft.
The early line. only on SportsGrid.
All right, back here on Pro Football Today, taking a look at some of the teams drafting in the 20s. But what stood out to me, Joe, looking through it actually, it's kind of playing like dirty pool in a way, because I'm just going to bring up teams drafting in the top 10, is the teams with repeat picks, right? So if you look between 20 and 30, there are 4 teams who will be on the clock for the second time. Dallas, Cleveland, Kansas City, and Miami. So I want to ask you a general overview question. If you are one of these teams who knows, hey, I got something coming to me later, are you almost saying, forget need? I'm just best player available, don't care about anything else when I come up with one of those first selections?
No, when you draft in those positions, Kevin, yeah, best available, that has to start. I mean, that's the bottom line, right? You just don't take the best available player and he's going to sit, on the pine for a year? I hate that mentality. I want to go and fill as many needs as I can with the best player available on the board. And if they're not there, then I'd rather trade out or get multiple, mid-round draft picks for those players that I could develop and build out the roster. We're in a win now type of mentality. So, it's a different mindset than, 20 years ago, where you draft the best available player and whether you have a spot for him or not doesn't matter because you have a resource. I always believe now you draft the players that could start immediately in positions of need to help your team this year and not beyond. And that's just the way it plays out. You mentioned Dallas. They have 12 and 29 or whatever their position is. I think Dallas still needs defensive help in the secondary. And again, we'll see what they do. But, we have the offensive pieces in place for Dallas. They have multiple needs on the defensive side of the football.
So for me, I believe, Joe, we have a somewhat consensus 8 blue chip-ish players in this draft. It's not a perfect consensus, but I would say, in no order, Mendoza, Reese, Love, Styles, Tate, Bailey, Bain, and Downs. When I look right now, people can say, oh, what about Mansour Delaney? What about Francis Mwaga? I don't feel like those guys are discussed the way the other 8 guys are discussed. So when I see some of the mock drafts, and I am not attacking any mock drafter, I've done it myself here on the show. We'll probably do it again next week. I promise. When I see a team like Arizona take Francis Mwaga at 3, that feels like a disaster. That feels like a total disaster to me, having the 3rd pick and not coming away with a blue chip-ish player. I've heard rumors about Cleveland now, Joe, taking Caden Proctor at 6. Caden Proctor really interests me. I adore that he caught the ball more than once at Alabama. But Caden Proctor being selected at 6th because Cleveland says I must draft offensive line, I don't know if I love that. Do you look at this Cleveland roster and think, oh, they only have one thing to fix? I don't.
No.
And I know people think they're going to take Tate if he's there. Yeah, but if he's not there and David Bailey's there, take David Bailey. To me, it's what makes Kansas City very interesting at 9, Joe. But do you think, would you rather this team take Caden Proctor at 6 or take Arvell Reese? I think I'd rather see them take Arvell Reese at 6.
Well, here's the thing about Cleveland, Kevin. You're going to say, and I know where your mentality is, hey, take defense, and then you could always ship out Myles Garrett and get the 3 drafts.
Nicely. A couple of houses in South Jersey on the market for Myles.
There we go. Get them out of Dodge, right? We restructured the contract, get the 2 or 3 first-round selections, and we'll keep rebuilding, and the hamster wheel goes round and round. I get that. But if you're serious about Cleveland ever contending for a playoff berth, they need wide receiver help. I mean, and what better way than to get potentially Cornell Tate, the Ohio State Buckeye, in Cleveland, right down the road. I mean, come on now. They need to help out. They have Fannin. They have Quinshon Judkins coming off injury. Hopefully he's the guy. They have Dylan Sampson. They have nice pieces, and they did a great job of drafting defense last year. So, again, I don't like that mentality. I don't want them to go defense again. I want them to address the offensive side of the ball, and then they can grow potentially with Shedeur Sanders and Monken, now the new head coach. But when you say Arizona is taking offensive line, right? They had one of the worst rushing attacks in the NFL.
Yeah.
For them, it's the safe pick, right? Because all GMs and scouts will say, "Oh, it's this. You can't go wrong, drafting offensive line." Although, ask the New York Giants that. Outside of Andrews, when Eric Flowers and what they have drafted over the past few years hasn't worked out offensive line wise, right? But that's the safe pick. That you're not going to get bashed if you're a GM going offense or defensive line, right? So that's why they'll do it. Again, I think for Arizona, they have multiple needs. And again, we have to see what happens with Marvin Harrison Jr. in year number 2 and beyond. It's just amazing. But so for me, if I'm the GM, I'm taking the guy that can help my offense. Tell me the team, and I'll tell you where to go. I think Tennessee needs wide receiver help. If they draft Jeremiah Love, they're crazy. They are absolutely nuts.
I think taking Love at 4 is on the board. I think I've agreed with you, though. I think the first mock we did on this show, Joe, I put Tate at 4 because I think getting Cam Ward, they don't have wide receiver. Like when Vegas took Gentry last year, they're like, well, we have Bowers, right? The Titans don't have, like, come on, with DeWandale Robinson, right? Like, let's not be ridiculous here. But so this is kind of my point, Joe, right? Let's say that Tate goes 4 to Tennessee and the Browns come up on the board at 6 and David Bailey's on the board. You want them to pass on David Bailey?
No, I would start David Bailey and Garrett.
Yeah, I would. Listen, I would too, but I'd also entertain trading Miles out of Cleveland. Thank you. I'll be right back. Joe, I want to ask you, as you know, we're here on Pro Football Today, Kevin Walsh, Joe Lisi. I do want to ask you about Seattle because, mock drafts all disagree. And we talk about, getting the most out of a pick. I've seen some have Seattle taking Jadarian Price at pick 32, Notre Dame's other running back. What a team. Can't believe they weren't in the college football playoff. A legitimate disgrace. One of the worst things we'll ever see in the history of the CFP. But do you think Seattle adding a running back in potentially round 1 is something they should be open to and maybe even consider a priority?
No. They have Charbonnet coming off an injury. I get that. But think about, because they lose Kenneth Walker, they have to draft in the first round Jadarian Price. We have seen running backs and value of running backs anywhere from the 2nd to the 7th round, and even free agent signings come in and just, make and produce right from year number 1. So again, why would you waste the 32nd pick? And again, I don't want, it's not a knock on Price in any way, shape, or form. It's just that because they lost Kenneth Walker, they're going to follow that need immediately with the running back, Jadarian Price, who runs hard and was just as productive when he was in there as Jeremiah Love. No, you would fill out the roster, other needs. I still think they need a wide receiver help outside of JSN. I still think they can draft a wide receiver. I would take a wide receiver. They need corner. Cornerback is available. Why draft a running back 32nd overall? To me, is a waste.
So I think it's very difficult because I think Jadarian Price is pretty much seen as the second best running back in this class. I think it can be hard to know exactly how good Jadarian Price is due to the fact that his teammate is going somewhere in the top 7, which is a very, Joe, again, you go back much further than I do with the college football, Rolodex. How many times has a team had 2 running backs potentially be the 2 best backs in a class? Or, 2 of the 3, 2 of the 4 best backs? You tell me. I don't know.
Well, you could go.
Was there
back,
an Oklahoma team, a Bama team? I don't know.
I would have to think back 2 top running backs. Not really. Not that I could think of. McFadden and Felix Jones. That crew.
Yeah,
I think.
McFadden.
That was 2005.
I've heard,
McFadden
I've heard
and
those
Felix
comparisons.
Jones. But here's the thing. You see, I get that, but I just wanted to take a look at who's available, okay? Because obviously so many players, right? You're telling me, Kev, now my guy Mike Washington is there, right? I was very high about Mike Washington.
Yep.
But Nick Singleton is there? You're telling me that with that offensive line, if you're going to take Jadarian Price, you can't potentially get the same type of productivity with Mike Washington or Nick Singleton, splitting time with Zach Charbonnet. That's my point. It's not like I need Jadarian Price at number 32. It's not Saquon Barkley we're talking about.
Well, I just want to say again, the encyclopedia of college football, I think our guy used to say. Darren McFadden went 4th in 2008, and Felix Jones went 22nd. There was a 1 running back actually in between them in
what year was
Jonathan
that?
Stewart. Through the 2008 draft.
Oregon, 28. Big Carolina Panther player. I loved him. Split time there.
So you're talking, by the way, that means nearly 20 years since we've seen. And my thing is, taking a running back in round 1 can be difficult to justify. You're taking a running back who is coming off of a season where he had more than 10 carries 6 times, 5 times. And I'm not, by the way, I'm not downplaying Jadarian Price.
Right.
The reality is, it's like, yeah, I don't really know what I'm supposed to do with that. Jadarian Price caught 6 balls this year. Do I think Jadarian Price can catch the football? I do. Do I think he was given any opportunity to do that at Notre Dame? Not really. Jeremiah Love's incredible out of the backfield catching the football. Like Notre Dame was either up by too much to run Price that much or not up enough where the ball was still going to Love. So it's this very interesting blend. But Seattle loved running the football. Ken Walker's a chief, and Charbonnet blew up his knee. So at some point, they're going to look to add running back. I mean, that's just the reality for Seattle. We'll see how it plays out. We'll see how it all plays out here on Sports Grid. For Joe Lisi, I'm Kevin Walsh.
The process is closed. Let's call it out for what it is, right? And is it their fault? You could, they've been just besieged at Embiid, but it just continues, Kevin, right? As soon as he's like, don't worry about my health, and then here we are, right? I would have traded him a couple of years ago. I would have gotten ahead of the curve, Kevin.
Game time decisions, only on Sports Grid.
For those people who use YouTube, there's a new feature that is powered by AI. And what is this exactly, Simon?
So let's say you're watching Yankees highlights, and you can say, YouTube, when is the next game at Yankee Stadium? You see that information on the screen. How much is the cost? What seats are available? You see that information on the screen. All right, call the Yankee Stadium box office. I want to make a reservation for 2 tickets.
Newswire, only on Sports Grid.
Am I going overboard when I'm saying that? I've never seen anything like this.
He's damn good, and it seems like he has an extra focus on pitching. I saw him pitch with the Angels and hit with the Angels, and it seemed like hitting was what he was trying to prove. Maybe because guys like John Smoltz would come out and said, "Oh, he should be a pitcher only."
Outspoken with Dan Cilio, only on Sports Grid.
Shocking reality, I think, for college basketball. Certainly the purists, to see a legendary school struggle to land a current college heavyweight. But this is the new world order. Mike Malone is either going to be the greatest hire in modern college basketball history, or North Carolina is going to be conducting another incredibly expensive coaching search in the next couple of seasons.
The Early Line, only on Sports Grid.